MJF, Bryan Danielson, Ironman match is our main event, and we have Danielson come out, and MJF, before he enters, we get a choir of devil worshippers out here as they're playing violins, cellos, and I thought this was like a really relaxing tune that they were playing before MJF's like obnoxious music just goes over the speakers.
They were playing MJF's theme.
Yeah, I thought it was really nice. It was like the acoustic version.
Sure, yeah.
MJF then comes out in a white devil mask, and
the same one he had for
the Punk deal at the end of All Out.
No, for what? Yeah, when he won the chip. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So MJF drops his belt as he's being introduced in the ring, and the crowd just jumps on him over it. And they note as well that Bryce Remsburg has been training for this match, which they gave this guy a workout for some of these sequences.
He looks to be in pretty good shape almost all the time. He's like one of the more active referees.
Well, he was, he was up for these 60 minutes, man, and he was all over the place. So early on, the two are matching one another, ending with dueling kip-ups. So the crowd's getting to their feet, and MJF offers his hand, and Danielson kicks it away. And we see MJF hop the barricade, dump some trash onto fans, and then takes a kid's drink, and he pours this drink onto this child. And this was a very debated spot.
He took the mother's drink. It looked to be clear, so I would assume water, and he dumped it on the child. And what sort of debate was registered here as a result of that?
Well, Tony Khan was saying they had a real discussion about this backstage. I guess insinuating that this was not a planned spot or something with a kid.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I even buy that. Like this felt like a really obvious plant, but
you would think so.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
But MJF looks into the camera and says, "Oh no, is this going to cost me a star, Dave? Maybe I won't win the Bryan Danielson award."
He probably won't.
Probably not.
Yeah, that's probably going to Bryan Danielson again next year, but I anticipate this to get plenty of stars.
MJF is in control, and he's working over the injured shoulder of Danielson. And then Danielson responds with a suicide dive, but in doing so, runs into the barricade. And MJF continues the attack. And the clock is showing up on the screen intermittently, but they've also got the... They had the scores on the screen. I don't know if they had the clock up on the screen the whole
intermittently.
time. Yeah.
No, not the whole time.
But for those in the arena, yeah, I think it was kind of in and out as well. Danielson hits a sunset bomb, and then we have Danielson skin the cat, but gets drop kicked to the floor, and MJF does his Shawn Michaels Heartbreak Kid pose right in the center of the ring for everybody. And with that, he felt like he was Shawn Michaels as he went for an Asai moonsault and jams his knee upon landing, and this became Danielson's target for the whole rest of the match. And I thought MJF did a phenomenal job selling this knee. Even like you and I will be critical when someone's selling the knee and then they do something stupid that goes against it. Like MJF would do things like the tombstone, but he played it up so big. Like, I hit this tombstone, but now my knee is totally screwed from doing this. And he just sold it throughout the whole rest of the way.
The psychology was fitting for the entire match. Yeah. This was also a knee injury that he had initially tried to sell after the Takeshita match, after he did the powerbomb onto the knee and sold it and taped it up for the remainder of that show. So I didn't think that he would bring it up, but evidently that was maybe always the plan with that setup. But by the way, people are saying like there are people reporting from in attendance that the mom was pissed and had to be talked down. So yeah, I guess sure, very legit, possibly that spot.
It was brought up at the press conference, but we're not watching the press conference, so I can't really speak to what was said. Danielson comes off the top, and MJF catches him in the salt of the earth, but Danielson rolls through, and MJF captures him into a pump handle driver. And dude, Taz's reaction to this, like, he apparently like jumped, as Excalibur notes, because of the angle he came down on his neck as a guy that's also broken his neck.
A very, very dangerous move. It's one that I believe he used to use like on the indies, this half Nelson pump handle driver. Very scary, especially when it's a guy like Bryan, but they executed it. Yeah.
And then they are doing these rolling inside cradles all over the ring, these nonstop reversals of sunsets, and then the rolling covers continue. Awesome sequence. And then a double clothesline puts both men down. The crowd is applauding this. And with that, Danielson rises to his feet and lands the Busaiku knee to get the first fall of the match at 25 and a half minutes. What did you think of this match by the first fall?
Well, first of all, I want to talk about like the match order and the fact that we were about to watch an Ironman match. What, like three plus hours in? When did this start? Like 11?
Around 10:45.
10:45. Okay, so if you're counting like when we first saw that buy-in match, I mean, it was like an hour and a half into the 3.5 hours into the show. By the time this match began, I was not tired. I was not dreading it. Like, and I think it tells you how great the rest of the show was. The fact that it was not a bloated feeling show by the time we got to this point. And I think for me, it was the grandiose stature of an Ironman match that was enough for me to like be excited and energetic for it. I thought it was really strong. I thought the character work was strong. I thought the body part work was strong. And I thought establishing MJF as, at least at the early stage, a technical equal to Bryan Danielson before he had to resort to, cheating, of course, and underhanded moves, I thought was very entertaining. 35 minutes, I think, is a very understandable and justifiable point where somebody would eat a pinfall.
So Danielson is up 1-0, and MJF collapses before he can take a follow-up Busaiku knee. And an element of this match is that there were no rest periods. So psychologically, you have to work that into the match too, that if you have the guy beat, there's nothing preventing you from continuing to go for a cover or keep a submission or go back to a submission. So you had to work that in too. Like, it made no sense to just go to your neutral corner or something like that. So MJF then lands a low blow, and for this is disqualified. But with the low blow, he gets 2 successive falls on Danielson. So all of a sudden, it is 2-2 between them.
I kind of feel like this whole portion could have maybe been better communicated with the help of like a ring announcer or something. Like the way they did this match, they didn't really have the ring announcer do any live updates. They just simply popped the number on the screen. And those of us at home, like, obviously have the benefit of a commentator. But I imagine, like, if you're watching live, all of a sudden there's in the span of like 30 seconds a DQ and then 2 pinfalls, and all of a sudden the score goes from 0-1 to 2-2. It might be, it might have been the flow of it might have been improved a little bit more with some sort of like other signifier, but I'm sure by the end everybody understood.
Well, yeah, the low blow was right in front of Bryce, so maybe people connected the dots on that. But as well, like, we see a lot of times.
We see a lot of low blows.
AEW and referees are just watching stuff.
Something just to kind of officially recognize that this was a decision,
This is also around the time that Bryan Danielson joins the All Blood Club, and he starts leaking, and they fight on the edge of the apron. Again, it's Danielson going for the knee, MJF going after the shoulder, and MJF places Danielson onto the timekeeper's table. MJF climbs to the top, and he goes through with this incredible elbow drop, huge spot in the match, and he's clutching his knee, and then demands that Bryce get into the ring instead of check on Danielson because he wants to win by a count out, and Danielson gets in at the count of 9. But this elbow drop was spectacular looking.
I thought it almost looked like a bit sloppy, and when
really?
Like in the way that his legs were kind of like splailing, towards the end. But I thought it worked for the character. Like, he's supposed to be a character that rarely dives off the top rope, and so it almost felt like he was going to a direction that he was desperate to go to because he's not normally comfortable doing this. But this is also a guy that used to do like Swanton Bomb. So like, obviously, like, I wouldn't put past him if this was all the work too.
Well, and when he's climbing up, like, it looked like he almost like lost his footing on the top before he like regained his balance. And then
remember, we're like 40 something minutes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's, the time is going by quick. Like there was no drag for me in this match at all. Like, they kept the intensity up pretty significantly. And again, they had a great crowd to do this in front of. MJF then takes Danielson and hits a tombstone onto the remnants of the broken table, again hurting his knee in the process. He's in agony, screaming, and then hits a heat seeker, pinning Danielson at 40 minutes or so. So he now goes up 3-2, but they explain his knee is too hurt and he can't capitalize to go for a follow-up cover, which I thought was a great little attention to detail. also throughout this, MJF is constantly going for water. And this would all play itself out at the end, but it's like this idea that he is struggling to keep up with Danielson and has got to like hydrate himself.
So this to me sells the sort of attraction of an Ironman match. You're getting to see a performer get into territory that you've never seen him get into before. And I thought MJF sold this really well through the constant water breaks and later on the oxygen breaks as well. You need to convey to the audience that you're barely surviving, towards these final 15 minutes. And I thought it was very effective what he did.
Then with Danielson selling, he gets his hand stomped, and now MJF is looking to the camera with Danielson. Say hi to Birdie and Buddy. I told you this would happen to Dada. And both Bellas were at the show as well.
Oh, okay.
Danielson then reverses, and he ends up posting MJF on the floor, hits a flying knee, and then Danielson climbs to the top, and he just like free falls on top of MJF, which Taz says there's no lucha name for that. I mean, he just like jumped off and was like his body weight was going to land on his target.
I mean, technically, I think it was a plancha, but sure.
Sure. This was like a dude just jumping into the pool without any concern. There's a spider suplex by Danielson and then lands a diving headbutt, which ends up opening up MJF. And when I say opened him up, I mean this man lost about 10% of his body weight with this blood loss. This was his tribute to Muto.
Yeah, it's the type of blood that I think if I showed a still of it, I think this video would get flagged and maybe possibly demonetized. Like he might have cut an artery here. He must have taken blood thinners and just about everything because like the moment he cut, like this dude outbled John Moxley on this show, and
this was the most blood of anyone on the show. It went to MJF.
Yeah.
He lands a Busaiku knee and then applies the Regal stretch, and MJF has to tap out. I was glad that they incorporated the Regal stretch here for the story and that MJF had to tap out to it. So with 10 minutes to go, it is tied at 3, and he goes to reapply the move when MJF grabs the arm for the Salt of the Earth. Danielson rolls out. Now he gets the label lock, but MJF is able to scramble out of it back to the Salt of the Earth, and he figure fours the arm, hyperextends the other arm, and grabs the leg as he morphs into Max Sabre Jr.
Very nice. Yes. That maybe he really is going after the Bryan Danielson award.
I think so. I think he outlined his target earlier in the match. Then he hits a heat seeker, only gets a 2 count, and we've got 4 minutes to go. He takes another thing of water, which leads to the crowd chanting H2O, which I'm glad they got over this chant. As we're in the last 4 minutes, I don't think we need our comedy chant of the night, but this was brief. MJF stops him on the turnbuckle, hits a tombstone, the knee is too hurt, and they do a close-up, and they had done a headbutt exchange, and they're, of course, delivering strikes and stuff, so I don't know what it was that hit him, but he's got this welt on his forehead that is going to look awful tomorrow.
Bryan or MJF? I missed
MJF. Like it was just this knot on his forehead that they had zoomed in on. And then Danielson catches him with the single leg crab with a minute left, and this crowd goes nuts. They have peaked this perfectly. They are so loud. He pulls MJF to the center, and MJF is about to tap, but then he stops himself. Awesome reaction here. And then Danielson hooks the other arm in the final seconds. The bell rings, and then MJF taps, but the match is over, and it is a 3-3 tie after 60 minutes. They have to get an oxygen tank for MJF, taking us back to a Double or Nothing last year with Wardlow. Remember when they had to take him out on the gurney?
And there was an oxygen tank?
They put the oxygen mask. Remember it was like on his they right. Screwed it up on him and they were taking him out on the like gurney.
His head, his forehead was getting
it was on his forehead. They were much better. They were much better trained this time around a year later. And the crowd is chanting bullshit because they're thinking that MJF retains the title based on them hitting the time limit. But the 60-minute portion, your thoughts on how it culminated?
Fucking remarkable. Absolutely. And like, to me, like, again, the Ironman match, on the surface, it feels like maybe a really long movie for you, John. Like, you might not necessarily be looking forward to watching a 3-hour movie in the theater. But I think, almost in every situation. By the time we get to the final 10 minutes, you might be on your feet, you might be watching, you might be like, screaming your head off. And that's exactly what I think this crowd did. Like by the moment they got to the final 10 minutes, especially with the great job they did telling that story of MJF's exhaustion, along with both of their body parts basically falling off. I thought they built to such an incredible crescendo, especially, for those final seconds with the single leg crap. I love the oxygen mask, like, again, you have a guy bleed this much. It's incredibly legitimate that they would be barely like surviving on a lack of oxygen right here. So I thought it completely made a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, and Tony Schiavone gets the instructions in his earpiece, and he goes to the ring and says that Tony Khan is not going to let this end in a draw, so we're going to sudden death rules. And the whole crowd is chanting yes. MJF then shoves Bryce, and Danielson gets a roll up for a 2 count. Max hits the low blow, so they're teasing that, man, they're going to end this off like a low blow. And then MJF grabs the belt, but he's warned by Bryce, you use that belt, then you're going to lose the belt. So go right ahead. And he hands over the title, and with Bryce going to remove the title from the ring, MJF pulls out the ring, but Danielson ducks and hits a Poison Rana. 62 minutes in, he's going for a Poison Rana, hits the Busaiku knee, and this was the best near fall of any match on this show. This crowd, they bit on this Busaiku knee, and Schiavone screamed. It was the most animated I've heard Tony Schiavone in decades. This, I think it everyone bit on this. It was a tremendous, tremendous near fall.
Yeah, everything here in the sudden death I thought was very, very believable. Every false finish.
He goes back to the half crab on MJF, and this is when Bryce sees the ring, and he takes the ring off of his finger, and MJF is fighting the hold. He slaps the mat, but he's not tapping out, reaches the rope, and then he taps, and Danielson releases the hold because he thinks MJF has tapped out, not realizing he's at the rope, and Bryce is informing him that the match is continuing. So Max has slithered to the floor, and he's got the goddamn oxygen tank, and Bryan peers over the edge of the apron, and MJF cracks him with the oxygen tank in the head. And with that, applies the label lock onto Danielson. And Bryce takes the arm, and he lifts it once, and this is when I'm like, the Samoa Joe finish was amazing. He lifts it up twice, and then Danielson on 3 keeps his arm up, but MJF will not release the hold, and therefore Danielson finally has to tap at 5:16 of the sudden death period. MJF retains the championship, and that's how the show ends, with MJF as your AEW champion. Excellent match.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, what can you say? We saw 2 men go out there and have a 65-minute masterpiece. They set out with that intention, and they completely delivered. Both, I think, an incredible physical feat, a very legitimate physical feat, and also an incredible epic story that they crafted by the end of it. To me, this is up there with Ospreay and Omega as my two leading match of the year candidates. One of the best matches I've seen from both men. I'm maybe pretty safe to say my favorite MJF match. I only hesitate with Bryan because his catalog is so vast, but it's certainly up there. One of, if not the best Ironman match I feel like I've ever seen at 60 minutes length. They went 65 minutes following 3 hours. 4 hours, right? Of professional wrestling. Something like that. 3 to 4 hours.
I mean, the first match was around 7:15-ish. Yeah.
And one of those matches was a Texas death match. And not for 1 second of this entire 65 minutes was I ever not engaged. I think the spacing out between this and the Texas death match ultimately became very effective because as soon as Bryan bled, as soon as MJF bled, I was not even thinking about the Texas death match. Like, I thought their blade jobs were completely, and I was not necessarily even comparing them. Although, you might have even seen more blood here. Every action, every spot of this match had some purpose. I thought they chaptered it really well using the respective body parts injuries. I thought the blood was incredibly effectively used, particularly by MJF to sell the exhaustion reached by the end of this 60-minute time limit. And This is also like maybe part of the reason why I wanted to sell why I was hoping that they would sell the Ironman aspect a little bit more in the storytelling, because I knew by the time they got to this point, this would be the story. Who can survive? But when you get to 50 minutes, 60 minutes plus. But great drama achieved, especially in the sudden death. Really strong and almost a perfect 60-minute Ironman match.
Yeah, I think you got two very legitimate match of the year contenders on this show between the Texas Death Match and the main event, and I enjoyed both like tremendously. To have two matches like that on a show is incredible. Say nothing of the trios match that was the trios championship match that was on earlier. I thought this was a spectacular show. Like I would really have to look at some of the best AEW shows, but I would certainly put this one in the conversation. I really, really enjoyed this show. I just thought it was like an excellent professional wrestling pay-per-view, and would certainly be we can debate match of the year at this point. Show of the year, I think this is my early candidate for show of the year.
Yeah, I again, and I think much of that is because you can look at this show and you can look at the percentage of what great matches there were to just the number of matches. The fact that there are only 9 matches and almost all of them were strong is a major part of the reason why I think we're looking so fondly on this. I also want to say, because the result is good, to me does not excuse the build. This was a very heavily criticized build, and I don't want people to come out after and say, see, I told you guys this was going to be great. You were so negative about the build. The show is the show, but how interested you get people into buying the show is almost a different story. Like
that's what you're selling. You're selling the anticipation. Like that is like the end result is for those that you convince to buy the show.
Exactly. The end, like the show itself, I think is a great way to entice people to get your next show. But if you didn't entice people to get the show in the first place, then it's almost a different conversation. So ultimately, we'll see what the numbers are. If we do get those numbers, we have some from the press conference. I take it, but
early estimate. Yeah.
Strictly looking at the bell-to-bell action on this, yes, it was remarkable. I have to say, looking at the quality, absolutely.
And this is. This is the first show. Well, it's the second show with MJF, very much in this main event role. Like he had the Punk match a year ago, but then, challenging for the title, now defending the title. Like this is one that it is very much of like the MJF Danielson program. Like this is not a show where I think the lion's share is on MJF and Danielson. Like the Texas Death Match was promoted well as your number 2 match, but this was one where we had a definitive main event that was the headline attraction for the show.
Yeah, and ultimately a good decision to put it at the end because they more than survived, the billing.